as we see Gen Zs coming in, what's your perspective of how this is going to impact the future of GCCs?
The entire capability center construct hinges on talent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if there's no talent, I don't think anybody is going to be interested in this entire construct even. Today, when you bring it in the context of where we are today, I think the ask is, it is the skills. Of course, it's a non-negotiable. Just as cost has become a hygiene, the skill is a hygiene because you're not going to get hired if you don't have the skill. Gen Z is always called out. I don't know why. To me, it's a generation of talent. Like any other generation. I mean, you can tell by, from my hairstyle and my outlook, I don't belong anywhere close to this talent pool. They have been the biggest consumers of technology.
What inspiration did you gather to set up BridgePath Innovation? What is BridgePath Innovation? What do you guys do? And why do you think it's important for the GCCs, A, coming into India, and B, people that are already in India to take them to the next level?
When we engage with anybody that is coming to us for help in any one of these areas, we don't want to throw PowerPoint decks at these guys. We want to really understand, empathize, because we've walked in their shoes before.
How the GCCs would look in terms of the relevance to the world 5 years from now. What's your take on this?
The GCCs of the future belong to those organizations and leaders that are able to make the GCC a very nimble construct. Business of my organization, like the back of its hand. Because if you do not understand the core business of your enterprise, there is no value add. I mean, we can talk about, AI centers of excellence and this and that until the cows come home. Ask yourself the question, why am I doing what I'm doing? Always pick hard assignments.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode of the Sunny Shah Show. Today, we are going to look into the global capability centers. Imagine a looking glass as we see the future. How GCCs are going to define 2030 and beyond in terms of where they are in India and across the globe, and how it's going to shape up companies who are going to invest in India. And for this interesting discussion, I have a renowned guest who is an absolute veteran, 30 plus years of experience building GCCs from the scratch, scaling them in this part of the world, helping companies from across the globe, and now sitting on the other side of the table as the founder and CEO of BridgePath Innovation. Mr. Ram. Ram, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sunny. It's always a pleasure speaking with you.
So Ram, for our audience sake, I know you go by Ramaswamy Narayanan, but we're going to call you Ram. I hope you prefer it that way.
Thank you. I age about 10 years when you refer me by the whole name. So Ram is preferred.
Fantastic. Ram, I really appreciate you taking your time out today for our audience, and your perspective to the Global Capability Center is going to add a lot of value to our viewers and listeners. So thank you so much once again.
Pleasure is all mine. I look forward to this conversation.
Likewise. With that being said, Ram, Global Capability Centers is like the new buzzword. Everybody's talking about it. And while you and I both know it's been there for over 30 years now, India still enjoys a lion's share of the total number of Global Capability Centers across the globe. And I'm sure for the next 3 to 5 years, it's going to be an accelerated push as more and more companies are willing to invest. You are at the helm of things. You are at the epicenter of all that's happening. My first question to you, Ram, is where do you see this ecosystem 2030 and beyond? That's the perspective that we want to put today. Do you think India is shaping up aggressively to grace more and more GCCs coming in to our country? What's your opening statement to this thought process?
To me, I think it's an inflection point, and at the same time, I think it's a great opportunity. Look, like you said, Sunny, GCC is not something new. I think there's enough literature that talks about Texas Instruments having kicked off the journey, and right now it feels so old because in that last 30 odd years that you spoke about, I think there's tremendous amount of momentum, and I would say there's a metamorphosis of the GCC construct itself. So to me, if you ask me, is now the time? I think it has been the time. There's a lot more awareness of the art of the possible. And I also think that, there's been enough literature, a lot of noise in terms of the value proposition that a GCC can bring forward. I think that's really caught a lot of eyeballs, a lot of attention, which is also causing a lot of the enterprises that so far perhaps have been, on the fence saying, I'm not sure if this thing is right for me or not. I think are now saying, you know what, we can't wait any longer. I think that immediate, willingness to take the plunge, because it's a proven model, it's a proven construct. It's not like, I don't know anything about the GCC. I mean, the statistics already say that this thing has been proven at least 2,000 times before by companies. I think a lot of these, to me, and that's why I say it's a golden moment, but it's also an inflection point for reasons that I'm sure we'll speak about.
You often describe GCCs as the engine of transformation. I've seen you talking very aggressively about innovation, about research. Where do you see the global capability centers evolving in India from that perspective?
See, before I answer the question, Sunny, I think the one thing I observe, we tend to put a lot of companies and all kinds of companies into that single bucket of GCC. Now, while the GCC is a construct, I think it very much differs depending on what is the nature of the enterprise that is creating the GCC. And why I want to prefix that in terms of answering this question, innovation has different connotations depending on the nature of the enterprise that is really creating this GCC for furthering its business objectives. So I would broadly say there are two forks. One, I'd like to call them as the tech native enterprises, which means their product is tech. So this could include your product companies, SaaS platforms, anything. So basically, you're creating tech, you're selling tech, and tech is your business. And the other hand, you have companies which don't have tech as their core business. So for example, you take retailers, or you take even a furniture maker.
Yep.
My principal business is to make furniture, but I am going to leverage tech in order to make sure that I do it faster, I do it better, I do it cheaper, and I can also get to a maximum amount of the global marketplace so that I can sell this. But my core focus is I want to make better furniture, I want to sell better furniture. Now, why does this matter? Because when you look at it as a tech native company, if you are not innovating, you're toast. Because your products have to keep pace with everything that's happening on the tech landscape. So therefore, you will find a lot of companies where the GCCs are that of tech native companies have a higher propensity of innovation, the way we like to say, great tech, digital, innovation. We're talking about bleeding edge technology and so on and so forth, because they will have to do a lot of these things to thrive in the marketplace. Now, contrast this with the GCC. That's, for example, the furniture maker. Now, for them, digital transformation and a lot of things that we talk about is fundamentally how it makes them a better business at what that core business is.
Sure.
Now, this distinction is important because a lot of the times we end up speaking about, in the same breath, we apply, a definition of innovation to everybody. And look, I think one of the frustrations that, I sense with a lot of discussions that I have with, leaders of GCCs, some organizations, particularly the enterprises, support and promote a lot of the innovation culture through, everything that's enterprise support, tools, technologies, what have you. But the same thing is not true. Or there's a feeling that, I'm being shackled, that I'm not able to move as fast when it comes to innovation when you're part of the brick and mortar company. I think rather than feel frustrated, I think we have to understand this distinction as to what really makes the push. Now, having said that, I do think that, the GCC's makeup has changed in the last 30 years. And I think, while I feel old saying this, the first wave of GCCs is very clear. It is cost. We are coming here for cost. And for people that have been long enough, they have seen that, 1 FT in the US is 2.75 or some crazy number like that. So the whole game was, hire more people, let's lower cost, let's get the work done. I think after that, the natural progression was, hey, these guys seem to be doing a great job. I don't think they need the training wheels. They don't need to be told. Maybe there are some parts of it that we just give it off to these guys. Hey, why don't you guys manage it? I think that spelled the next era in terms of what we call as project ownership and product ownership and things of that nature. Take it further. I think the teams in India through the construct and otherwise said, hey, we can take ownership, but oh, by the way, we have some great ideas. I think you're missing out on something here, or this could be made better. I think the more that feedback started going, that's when enterprises realized, you know what, we have the cost. We have a great set of people who can take ownership of things when given to them. And they also seem to have some fantastic ideas. And that's what is the natural progression. But over the years, if you see, it's a continuum. Now, I wouldn't say that every GCC is throwing fantastic ideas. The number or the ratio of such companies has increased. So let's say 30 years ago, 95% of the companies would have been focused on cost. The next 10 years, you would have said about, 70% of the companies would have been focused on cost, and the rest would have progressed maybe about 25, 28% on why don't you own this, and about 2-3% on innovation. Now the gamut has changed. Now people are not talking about cost as much, not because cost is unimportant, it's hygiene.
Right.
I mean, you better be cost efficient. So therefore, the ratio of conversations is ownership is given. What are your ideas? What can you do to make the business better? I think that thrust, that needle is really the opportunity. And that's why I call the GCC as a hub of transformation. And that is what it truly is, because it's a microcosm of the enterprise. In my view, I don't think it exists anywhere else in the globe. And enterprises have understood how to harness that microcosmic effect.
So India has a true advantage here.
Absolutely. And I think we've been doing this for 30 years. So I think in a sense, we've perfected it.
Fantastic.
Of course, it's never perfect. But what I mean by perfection is, I think we've done this so many times that, we are absolutely confident of the talent that comes forward and the fact that how we can take this and bring value to the enterprise.
So you brought up some interesting points, Ram. As India evolves from being a cost center driven GCC to a value transformation driven GCC, next gen technologies like AI, automation, how do you see them contributing in this journey?
See, tech evolution has always been there. I know that, today no conversation is complete without mentioning AI at least once. While I admit that AI seems to be a little bit more on everybody's, mind at this point in time, just given the fact that it's got an all-pervasive nature in terms of it can touch a lot of things. But so were technologies in the past. I mean, if you talk about it in terms of, when we came in, a lot of the centers were set up here to do application development and support in the good old days. ERP support, mainframes, things of that nature. When technology leapfrogged to digital, it was also a change, but it was gradual. I think right now, if you look at the rate in which technology is also changing, I think it's going at breakneck speed.
Right.
I mean, I would imagine by the time you and I are done in this conversation, there's probably a few more technologies out there that we will learn about. I think the challenge right now is how do I keep pace? Because in the past, the GCCs in some way, shape or form were expected to, hey, we've been doing this technology work. It's been done for some time, so we've proven. So why don't you take the proven baseline, put it into a GCC so it can be further optimized? Right now, there is no optimization. Everybody is learning at the same time. Everybody is getting exposed to the same technology all at once. To me, that really is going to be the challenge and the opportunity for the GCCs when it comes to keeping pace with the technology. And I think there's a few things that, GCCs will need to do specifically in this regard. Is one, don't wait, for technology to stabilize and be ripe. I think that's why I think there's a lot of, literature again and people with very strong opinions saying, hey, I don't want to be the order taker. You hear this in every forum. Well, if you don't want to take the order, well, you better have the front row seat and
Right.
You decide how is it that you want to approach the enterprise and tell them, what are your ideas? How can you help the business get better? That's the opportunity. So as we continue this conversation, I think there's a lot of different ways
Right.
in which GCCs can push themselves forward to really be that transformational agent for the enterprise through this construct.
Ram, talent, I'm sure you would agree, is the core of any global capability center's success. And as we see new age talent strategies, as we see Gen Zs coming in, what's your perspective of how this is going to impact the future of GCCs?
I don't want to make this question a response based on generation of talent.
Sure.
I think it is, yes, it is a variable. It's something that we need to consider. But let me also say that the entire capability center construct hinges on talent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if there's no talent, I don't think anybody is going to be interested in this entire construct even. And for all that progression that we spoke about in the last 30 years, one of the reasons why India, amongst many other countries, of course, of late, you can see there's many other locations that are also kind of, spinning up capability center constructs. But I think the arbitrage of this country is its talent arbitrage.
Okay.
And we have already spoken that cost may not be the most distinguishing factor. But having said that, the geography itself has a certain element of arbitrage of cost. But today, I think what is bringing enterprises into this country to explore the GCC construct is all about talent. I mean, there's enough and more statistics to speak about the fact that we will continue to have this talent arbitrage for some time to come. But then I think what has been the definition of talent has changed over a period of time. I think if you look at, the progression of talent, it's about hunker down, get the work done. It was all about skills.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk about skills, it's about, okay, I'm going to give you something. Can you do that efficiently? Can you do that well? Do you have the required skills in order to get it done? As the maturity of these centers have progressed to value delivery, I think talent and expectation of talent is also morphing. It's no longer about you have the skills to do things efficiently. It's also about, can you now take ownership? Can you suggest alternatives?
Right.
Can you bring in a perspective that you have in terms of how can this be done even better? So if you look at what's happening from a talent standpoint, there is an expectation in terms of the growth, the intellectual growth of talent. And today, when you bring it in the context of where we are today, I think the ask is, it is the skills. Of course, it's a non-negotiable. Just as cost has become a hygiene, your skill is a hygiene. Because you're not going to get hired if you don't have the skill. But what's expected of you now is to bring in that true blue capability, which means being able to take ownership, suggest, and also make recommendations based on your understanding of not just the problem you're solving. Why are you solving the problem? For who are you solving the problem? What is going to be the implication in terms of value if this problem is solved? And what's the best way to go about doing this? Now, if that is the talent, and if that's the journey of talent, now let's bring the generational focus in. When I speak to a lot of, leaders, when I speak in a lot of forums as well, one of the questions that comes in, Gen Z is always called out. I don't know why. To me, it's a generation of talent. Like any other generation. I mean, you can tell by, from my hairstyle and my outlook, I don't belong anywhere close to this talent pool. But in my own generation, I've seen at least 3 more stages of, the generational talent come in. The more newer generation of talent, I just believe they are more tech native than I was. Technology is second nature.
Right.
They understand the power of technology. They have been the biggest consumers of technology. So what happens, therefore, is that technology is so native in what they bring in. Now, the question is, how do I harness this technology potential so that they are context aware?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of what used to happen in GCCs per se about let's skill people, let's conduct this kind of a training, I think it's all passé.
Okay.
I think today, nobody's waiting for companies to spend the money and send you to a training class. I think as we speak, everybody is taking courses in a myriad amount of, platforms that are available. Access to skills, access to knowledge in terms of making themselves better is everywhere. So I don't think anybody is coming into a company now and saying, I'm here for you to train me and teach me. I think the talent is now coming and saying, you know what, give me work that I know is important for you as a problem to be solved. And I know that the impact that I'm making matters to you, the business. I think that's the mindset shift that's happening when it comes to talent and the generational need for the talent.
Let me pick up the looking glass again, and we're talking about 2030. But before we get there, let us take inspiration from your own journey. After being at the helm of things for almost over 2.5 decades, what inspiration did you gather to set up BridgePath Innovation? What is BridgePath Innovation? What do you guys do? And why do you think it's important for the GCCs, A, coming into India, and B, people that are already in India to take them to the next level?
So let me answer this question through a life cycle journey in a context. And I think that way, I think you and of course the audience will appreciate what BridgePath is about. So when you typically look at how a GCC comes into being, it's either a result of management consulting firms and the large consulting firms that go in and take a look at an enterprise in terms of how can the enterprise become better with whatever it is doing as its core business. Now, there are many aspects of the business that are considered, and one of the aspects is either technology or a business process. And most often than not, the recommendation is, I think you guys should globalize, which means why don't you take advantage of the talent and the cost arbitrage and everything else that we spoke about, including more recently, the innovation arbitrage of geographies like India and others. Now, imagine this is what the study happens, and then the study and the report is handed off to an enterprise. What's the next thing that the enterprise does? I think we need to go and set up shop. So the very next step that happens on the process is they're looking at who can help us in this journey.
Sure.
And then they identify a set of partners, either from their existing ecosystem or through, references and whatnot. But the next action really is to say that, hey, can we go down and see how these centers operate? And for the lack of a better word, I call that the Rath Yatra, is because you have people that are ferried across. They meet multiple companies, learn what happens, and in the process also select a supplier or a vendor. To do what? To basically put together the utility layer of the GCC.
Okay.
What is the utility? Hey, can you set up my legal entity? Can you get me an office space? Can you hire talent? Can you run their payroll and everything else? Financial services, compliance. And that's where the journey begins. And fast forward, thus a center comes in, legal entity set up, office exists, and you have a bunch of people. Now, this is where, again, the enterprise comes back and says, okay, now how do I go about even harnessing value out of this? The reason for that is, for years, the enterprises that are coming in and setting up these centers have outsourced their work to third-party service providers. And in most cases, what they have seen is manage the program or manage the relationship. The brass tacks of getting work done has always been managed by a third party. Now, the same set of people are not equipped to build an organizational construct on their own. Fast forward on the life cycle, few years pass, GCC was set up, well, it's humming along fine, but now the enterprise expectations have changed. And one fine day you wake up and you figure out that maybe the GCC does not have the right kind of capabilities to take us to the next level. Now, if you see, there are a lot of white spaces in this entire journey. The first one being, you shall globalize. You come down and straight away start building. From there, you're struggling with, okay, how do I harness value? And the last part of the journey is, how do I consistently keep my GCC machinery relevant to the organization? Now, when I looked at this entire life cycle, Sunny, what struck me the most is, are enterprises not asking these questions? I'm pretty sure they are. Who are they asking these questions to? In a lot of times, it's either to consulting organizations that have a pretty good idea about how global capability centers function, or to the service providers who always been like, hey, Bob, why don't you go play golf? Give me a problem and I'll solve everything for you. If you look at both of these, there is no lived experience. None of these guys have ever built a center, lived in the trenches, seen the hardships and the success stories of a model like this. I think that's when I realized that what the market needs, what clients need, is somebody, an agency that they can trust because they're practitioners. because they have lived,
Right.
because they have seen the implications of a decision, sometimes the adverse implications of it, and sometimes some really good, things that happen out of the GCC because of decisions being made. So that was the motivation of setting up BridgePath Innovations as a firm that does one and only one thing: build, operate, transform global capability centers. So one of the things we wanted to be very clear about is it's that lived experience, so that when we engage with anybody that is coming to us for help in any one of these areas, we don't want to throw PowerPoint decks at these guys. We want to really understand, empathize, because we've walked in their shoes before. That is the core principle and ethos of what BridgePath Innovations is. 3 very specific things that we do, just to complete the story.
Sure.
1, strategic advisory and consulting. That can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, so let me clarify. If there's a question that an enterprise asks, hey, do you think I should go and build a GCC? This is really going to work for me. I think today you would agree that there's not a single agency that's going to give a straight answer, because there's always something that everybody's interested in selling.
True.
So either you are actively persuading them or actively dissuading them. I think our job is to say that, because that's all we do, GCCs, and from an practitioner-led perspective, is to answer the question, are you ready? Are you not? And second, we want enterprises to understand, what does the journey even mean?
Very true.
And if you think that you have the appetite for the journey after knowing fully what the entire journey means, by all means. The second part of the journey is really help them through the process, not just in the utility aspects, but in that value, which I told you that companies struggle with. How do we walk the walk with these enterprises so that they are able to start realizing value through the construct? And in the farther end, of course, work with the enterprises, most importantly, the GCC heads, as well as enterprise leaders, in terms of how to harness continuous value from these through evolution of the model. So those are the 3 very specific things that we do. And I always take this, as a pot shot, if you will. A lot of companies do GCC. They do 10 other things and do GCC as well. The one and only thing that BridgePath does is GCCs. I think that focus drives tremendous amount of value to our clients.
If I may double tap on this question, curious to know more about BridgePath, and by that virtue, you spoke a lot of good things about what you guys do as an organization, but if you were to summarize with crisp USPs, why should companies trying to set up their offices and operations in India consider BridgePath as a partner of choice? What would be those precise USPs that you would like to call out once again, so that our audience understands the differentiator?
That's a great question. So let me say 3 very specific reasons as to why I would want not just people considering, to set up GCCs, but also the ones that are here.
Right.
Is 1, for a GCC to be successful, it needs to have a direct path of value to an enterprise. Now, what BridgePath brings is, because the way we are structured, the way we come from practitioner lens of lived experiences across verticals, we are able to make the connection to the value that a company wants out of this construct. Our focus is not just on the construct. Our focus is on, what are you coming into this construct for?
Yeah.
So if you want to experience value in whatever the definition of your value is, you should definitely work with us. The second thing is that you're not going to get, this seems to be the right approach, or this is what we have observed from 10 other companies. This is really the lived experience that I spoke about. There are scars of battle. And look, Sunny, to be honest, I wouldn't say that every one of us, including myself, who are part of BridgePath, has been always successful with the GCC. We failed. And I think the value we bring to companies is through that failure, is to be able to tell them that, look, we've been in your shoes, we made some decisions, and this is what did not work, and maybe that's something you want to consider. And the third thing, I think why companies should come and work with us, if you want to work with someone who's going to ask you the tough questions,
right,
so that you can make the right decisions, I think that's where, I would encourage companies to work with us, is because we are very clear. We are not an agency that has all the answers. But I can tell you one thing. We will be one agency who's got all the questions that will make you think, because we believe fundamentally people are very intelligent. They know what to do. I think what's lacking is the right questions that make them think through the possibilities so that they can make an informed decision. That's BridgePath for you.
Fantastic. So these three differentiators, the USPs that you mentioned, right? Would they apply to existing GCCs in India as well? How can you add value to their causes, to their journey?
Absolutely. So let's talk about what's confronting an existing GCC. I think a lot of the times it boils down to saying, how do I continue to stay relevant?
Sure.
And we spoke a little bit about there are very different reasons as to why companies come and set up GCCs in India. While we don't like to talk about cost anymore, I think that's also the primary reason why companies set up, because there is that inherent cost advantage. I think what we are now beginning to realize is, if that's all you're coming in, may not be a great idea.
True.
Because over a period of time, that particular proposition of cost arbitrage is going to erode. So I think the struggle for GCCs is they were set up for a purpose. And now that purpose is passing for various reasons. How do I continue to remain congruent with where the enterprise is heading and where the business is heading? Now, few challenges in that are, I would say twofold challenges. One, while the GCC is that of the enterprise and the headquarters, the connective tissue between the enterprise and the GCC is trust and continuous dialogue.
Sure.
You would expect that this is something that's part and parcel of the GCC ecosystem. I would say it's sporadic. And the reason why it's sporadic is, I think, again, when an enterprise looks at this as saying, hey, I've got a center in India that's supposed to do a certain type of work. If it's not strategic enough, then that connective tissue starts getting weaker. And the more weaker it gets, over a period of time, you will find that the GCC is doing a great job with what was expected of it as of yesterday. Its relevance as of today and tomorrow starts diminishing. And this is where the dissonance begins. And to me, I think that's a great opportunity to bring everybody back to the table, headquarters, GCC, everyone alike, and say, can we take a pause and see, is this construct still relevant to you?
Right.
Is it still delivering the outcome that it's supposed to deliver to you? Is the GCC ready to do that? Are there things within the GCC that are irrelevant now that you should perhaps stop doing? These are the kind of conversations I think that existing GCCs come to us largely for. And I would only say this, why do they come to us when they have a lot of choices of companies that they can work with? I think, Sunny, like I said in the past, that trust that you guys have lived this experience before, I think is a huge, huge reckoning. And the leaders feel that when they speak to us, it's a safe space, because there's nothing that I'm going to kind of understand from them and come back and sell a bunch of solutions, accelerators, and what have you. We are here just to listen, empathize, ask the right questions, and help solve the problem.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
Very interesting. One thing our audience should know that I understand from my research about you is you're trying to bring up what I call a great piece of literature that is going to come out very soon in terms of your upcoming book, encapsulating 30 plus years of experience that you had in this industry. Can you tell us more about it? What's your book all about? What inspired you to write that?
I don't know if I was prepared to answer that question, but I'll take a crack. Well, I'll start with the title of the book. Well, the title of the book simply says, Why Global Capability Centers Fail. I think, and listening to that, I'm sure the audience is, okay, is this another book of doom and gloom? I don't think it is. Like I said, we're at an inflection point from a GCC standpoint. And if I reflect on my 30 years itself, I have largely been successful in certain environments as a GCC leader because some things worked collectively. I have also failed in GCC environments because certain things did not work collectively. But today, when we stand at the crossroads of what a GCC means, and we covered some ground in terms of, a GCC of 2030, the value arbitrage, innovation engines, and so on and so forth. These things don't just get created overnight. It's a series of intentional steps that several actors have to take in order to make a GCC successful. So the genesis of the book really is to be able to talk to the people that are going to be involved in creating a GCC, putting together all the building blocks of the GCC, nurturing it, nourishing it, so that the value that is expected of this construct can be kept at an optimal level so that it continues to stay relevant and also keep space with the changing needs of the business. Now, why the title, why it fails? I think it would suffice to say that, in this 30 years, I've heard a lot of stories, I've experienced a lot of stories. While there is immense potential, I think sometimes we don't take the time to ask the tough questions for various reasons. We also don't take the time to point out really collectively as an ecosystem as to what's broken.
Sure.
And what are some of the ways in which it can be fixed. So an attempt with this book really is to kind of bring all of that together to talk about right from how you conceive a GCC all the way to how do you continue to keep it sharp and focused on the outcome that is expected to be delivered is really the gist of the book. And it's really written as a referenceable book so that people don't have to read this like a novel and then say, there's a lot of good things about the GCC. You will find that it's a pretty balanced set of, it's a literature that talks about failures. It also talks about successes.
Sure.
And it talks about what is the difference between that failure and the success. What can you do about it? So think of it as a companion, a workbook of sorts, addressed to CXOs, GCC leaders, functional leaders. It can even be to people in the business that interact with the GCC, because everybody together makes it that ecosystem that it really is. So there's something for everyone. Let me put it that way.
Interesting. And when can we expect this to come out?
Well, I would say the entire manuscript is done now. Right now I'm in the process of, down selecting a publisher. So mid-October is when it's going to be. So probably call it a Diwali release is what I'm hoping for.
Interesting. So ladies and gentlemen, if you are watching this episode, in the description of this episode on YouTube, you will find Ram's LinkedIn profile. Make sure you follow Ram to make sure that you get your hands on the book as soon as it's released. This GCC opportunity, as it is painted across, it's almost looking like everybody's gunning behind it. While I understand that it's a great opportunity for our industry, it's a great opportunity for our country. What do you think? What's your perspective? What is in it for everybody?
So let me answer that question multiple different ways. Let's talk about the stakeholders. Let's talk about who are the people that are beneficiaries of this GCC story, the rhetoric. One, obviously, the enterprises. I think we have talked about it as to why enterprises need to look at GCCs. What's the value they get? Of course, the GCCs themselves.
Yeah.
But let's look beyond that. See, when an enterprise creates a GCC, it's by no means a silver bullet. I think sometimes what worries me is our enterprises rushing into this construct because they feel, I have tried, 2 or 3 things. I think the only thing I have not tried is a GCC. So why don't I just go build a GCC? That's the impression I get. But maybe that's unfounded. But that also kind of, makes you think about how are enterprises kind of conceiving this. Look, at the end of the day, companies have always worked with multiple people, multiple organizations to solve specific problems or to capitalize on opportunities as they become more and more available. The GCC is just one such construct that enterprises are beginning to harness more and more because it is the enterprise's own offshoot. In a way, it's basically setting up your own office location in a different country with your own employees, which means you're expecting that, they will take complete ownership because they're doing it for their company, not for someone else's. Now, that's the reason why the GCC is gaining a lot more traction. The question about why everybody is kind of looking at the GCC, I think if you look at the progression of the GCCs, For state governments, why it matters. I think it's become a big source of creation of employment and meaningful employment in terms of where the wage levels are pushed up, which means the standard of living of people is pushed up. While through direct employment, there's a lot of indirect employment this industry creates. So that's the reason why a lot of state governments are also saying, hey, you know what? I think this GCC makes a lot of sense. And therefore, policies are being created around it, incentives are being created around it so that more and more GCCs can come and set up so that there's a diversification of the GCC presence across the country. The second constituent that people are looking at is your IT service providers in the ecosystem. Why? I think traditionally they have enjoyed a very close partnership status with the enterprise.
Sure.
They've always been the go-to in terms of, if there's a problem, like I told you, Bob, go play golf, I'll solve the problem for you. So Bob likes, that he's got someone that he can bank on. But I think over a period of time, the service provider system has also kind of become aware that, the GCCs are here to stay, which means the GCCs as a mechanism for the enterprises are here to stay.
Sure.
So the enterprises are not only just creating this as an offshore outpost, they are making them equal parts decision-making bodies on behalf of the enterprise. And this is creating a shift. So today when you hear that, everybody is going towards a GCC ecosystem, I think it's a lot to say that enterprises are now going to create GCCs no matter what, because they feel that this is probably a really good way to build value for the organization long term. So everybody in the ecosystem has come to terms saying there is no point resisting it. How can we all become catalysts of this for an enterprise? Which means, how can I help an enterprise build its GCC faster, better? How can I help partner with the GCC so that we don't come across as somebody who's combating with the GCC in terms of, trying to do the same work, but we understand that there are certain things you may want to get done out of your GCC. And look, we'll partner with this GCC so that together we can deliver value to you. I think that's really what's causing everybody somewhat get into a frenzy of the GCC. And also, I think in the last couple of years, GCCs have occupied the right headlines for various reasons. But this is not to say that other parts of the ecosystem have been quiet.
Sure.
I think everybody has been sharpening their axe in their own little way. But ultimately, the convergence of all of that collective strengths, along with the GCC ecosystem, is what the enterprises are looking to harness. And that is the reason why everybody is now moving collectively towards, hey, maybe this is something that the enterprises are really going to hang their hat on from a long-term perspective.
Let's paint the picture of GCCs in 2030. Backed with your experience, where do you see in terms of having a vision towards how the GCCs would look strategically, how the GCCs would look in terms of the relevance to the world 5 years from now? What's your take on this?
It's like looking into a crystal glass, and a lot has happened in the world in the last few months, and a lot more will happen.
Yeah.
So keeping that as my alibi so that you don't hold me to this, but I will give you my point of view in terms of how do I see this evolving. We have just about reached, and I said at the beginning of this conversation that we have reached an inflection point and also an opportunity from a GCC standpoint. I think why both at the same time? When you look at businesses in 2030, they are not going to be conducted the way they have been conducted now. Just like businesses conducted now were not the way they were conducted 10 years ago. But the pace of change is accelerating to a point where it's very difficult to keep tab on these changes all at once. So to me, the GCCs of the future belong to those organizations and leaders that are able to make the GCC a very nimble construct. What does that mean? I talked about the connective tissue. I talked about the connective tissue only on two things. I talked about it in terms of, the trust element of it. And I also talked about it in terms of, I will empower you to go do what you have to do. But I think there are 2-3 other things that will become the connective tissue.
Sure.
The GCC will now need to embody the business. What does that mean? The GCC first has to fundamentally understand what is the business of my organization, like the back of its hand. Because if you do not understand the core business of your enterprise, there is no value add. I mean, we can talk about, AI centers of excellence and this and that until the cows come home, but you are not going to be able to make any impactful contribution to the enterprise if you don't know how your enterprise is structured and what is it after in terms of its business and markets. The second, those GCCs that will thrive in 2030 are the ones that are going to create themselves as an environment for the flow of work. What do I mean by that? Today, I still find a lot of GCCs that are structured by capability or competencies or skills, rather saying, I have a BI team, I have this team, and I have that team. I mean, these are skill pools. I think what companies are going to gravitate towards is capability pools. I mean, let's not forget a GCC, the middle name of that is capability, which means if you do not organize yourselves as pods of capability, then I think you're losing the narrative. So organizations, GCCs particularly, have to think about what is the structure of these organizations, what capabilities are they creating so that they become capabilities that are available to the enterprise. This brings me to the third one. By 2030, I don't think we are going to talk about global capability centers. We're going to be talking about global capability platforms. Because at the end of the day, when an enterprise is looking at consuming capability, I don't think there will be any affinity of a geography. It's going to go where the capability resides. We already see that a number of large companies have got multiple capability centers. A center is only a logical, grouping in my mind. The lesser that we start thinking that the GCC is its own life form, try to make the GCC think like it's something different from the enterprise and attribute more importance than necessary, the more you do it, you're going to alienate it. It's going to seamlessly feed into the enterprise fabric, as it so happens that we have this particular capability at this location. The more seamlessly the GCCs can navigate and become part of that enterprise fabric, I think that's where you're going to see the bang for the buck. And last but not the least, I don't want to make it AI specific. I know we talk about AI. I think it's like, this, the curve of, the Gartner's famous curve, in terms of, technologies go through its own path.
Yeah.
We've seen that AI is now front and center because I think it's coming down in terms of, the curve of disillusionment. And slowly it will start gaining traction in areas where it is applicable.
Okay.
The faster GCCs try and embrace that and look at it not just as a point opportunity. So if I were to take an example, so today everybody wants to look at AI if they're doing something that is specific to AI, which means, hey, I want to build an AI center of excellence. I want to create, chatbots. I want to create this and I want to create that. There's a lot many more things that an enterprise needs to do to be AI ready. Do you even have your data strategy right? How many systems are there in the enterprise in terms of readiness for a potential AI solution to take shape? What does that mean for a GCC? If they understand the business, they can actually become the champions of readiness reviews and even tell an enterprise that are we ready for a technology like AI? Why a third party may not be able to do it as efficiently as you? You know the business, you know your systems, and you belong to the enterprise. You are the closest that the enterprise can get to in terms of all of this knowledge put together. So it's opportunities like this. And my final, every GCC leader is going to become an orchestrator of value. Their role is to orchestrate value. The sooner GCC leaders look at their role, not as I will deliver value through my centers, to I will orchestrate value through these centers to the enterprise and every other needs that is available to me, not only will the leader be successful, the overall construct itself is going to be successful. So 2030 is going to call for leadership shift mind shift, skills to capability shift, and a center to a platform shift. I think to me, these are going to be the forces that are going to shape the narrative for GCCs by 2030.
Well said, Ram. You've been a leader who's built leaders. You mentored hundreds of people in the industry. What's your piece of advice that could be crucial for young professionals who are thriving to have a successful career and ride on this journey for the next 5 to 7 years?
I'll keep it simple because there's a lot of advice that, gets passed around. And sometimes, advice is also templatized by the generational aspect, which I talked about, parking all of that. I think the one thing to me is don't be a passive observer of your career as if you're doing a job. Because the longer you do it, that's all you'll be doing, a job.
Yeah.
And one day that job is going to disappear. Just like AI is doing it to us, some of those which are repetitive in nature. But look, I mean, don't get me wrong. Everybody is going to come in, and there are certain things that people expect of a place of work. I need to be treated with respect. I need to be paid fairly. I also need opportunities to learn. And I want to know that my contribution is actually of some matter to this company. This becomes hygiene. To me, I think while that hygiene is maintained, every single individual, no matter where you are in the hierarchy, ask yourself the question, why am I doing what I'm doing?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that I'm doing that's adding value to the enterprise? And how is it that I'm going about doing my job? Is there a better way to do it? Can I talk to someone so that that better way gets implemented? Constantly look for reinvention, because if you are not going to do it for yourself, nobody is going to come and do it for you. So stay curious. I would say stay present in your jobs. Ask questions. That's the only way. And to me, I think this advice still holds good. And this is something a mentor of mine did tell me, that always pick hard assignments. Not because, you just have nothing else to do in life, so just pick up a hard assignment and do it. I think hard assignments teach you a way of thinking that you've never approached a certain problem before. And look at that, in the face of things to come now, the world is only going to get more and more complex, which means plenty of opportunities to learn for the curious mind. So my only advice is stay curious, stay engaged, no matter where you are.
Interesting. Ram, what we've witnessed over the last hour or so of talking with you is nothing but great insights that almost reaffirms our belief that the Global Capability Center as an opportunity is real. Over the next 5 to 7 years, India would accelerate to be not only continue to be relevant in terms of the lion's share of global capability centers walking into our country, but also add tremendous value to the global enterprises as they emerge as value centers for them. Everything that you said during this time with me is pure gold, and I'm sure that this episode would be looked upon and referred back time and again as India shapes up to be the master of global capability centers. With that being said, this comes to the end of our conversation today, and I would like to thank you once again for being on the show.
Thank you. This has been a tremendous opportunity, and I'm sure and I hope that the audience finds a couple of nuggets from this conversation. I do believe strongly in the GCC ecosystem for a reason. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today. Please make sure you continue to subscribe to our channel, share this with your friends and family and colleagues. They may find this helpful. Until next time, this is me signing off. Thank you so much. Take care.